Live from the Salvation Army National Headquarters, this is the Fight for Good podcast.
Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fight for Good podcast. I'm your host, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Foley, recording from our studios here in Alexandria, Virginia. We hope you're doing well today. With me is our executive producer, Elizabeth. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning.
Here with us also is the assistant to the editorial director, Michele Katsaris. Hi, Michele.
Good morning.
In today's podcast, we're going to be sharing Michele's interview with Christian blogger and influencer, Kaci Nicole. Now, Michele, I understand you interviewed Kaci a little while ago, but she has a very interesting topic in that of that's important to all of us, and that is how to build and maintain healthy relationships. Kaci's dealt with toxic friendships and broken hearts and all kinds of different relationships, but through it all, she's kept God at the center of her own heart and her own walk. When you talked to her, what were some of the things about maintaining healthy relationships that just kind of popped out?
Yeah, I really liked how when she did speak, it wasn't really about any one person. Like, you could tell that like she had definitely had some struggles with friends or like a romantic relationship or even coworkers, and she didn't bring anyone's name up. She didn't tell any like gossipy stories. She really just kept it really positive and mostly said that people will come through your lives in different seasons for different reasons, and that's okay. And I just felt that just overall, she was just very positive person to speak to. And I know if I ever had like a problem with any relationship in my life, she would be the person I'd want some advice from.
Why are relationships a topic millennials should be talking about?
Because we have them in all walks of life. It really just depends on where you're at in life, because some people have relationships with coworkers, some people have friends, some people have romantic relationships, and some people even have difficult relationships with their own family. And I think millennials are just more open to talking about problems. I find that they're not afraid of confrontation, though, because it doesn't have to be a bad thing. So I think that they're just more open to talking and airing out those problems.
Well, I've experienced it in our office. I mean, and which I appreciate is that there's kind of a boldness to say, you know what, that idea needs to be, broken down or opened up or consider this or that. So, the relationship working within multi-generations, like what we have in our own publications and programs wing at NHQ is kind of exciting, because I really appreciate. I don't want to say pushback, because sometimes people would turn that as negative, pushing back. But what you're kind of saying is that there's really an important thing about give and take in a relationship for a millennial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like you said, it's not pushback. It's all about the way you say things, not how you say things. And I think that millennials are just more in tune with that. I know just growing up, my family, we're just loud. I mean, you can't hear or get a word in, and it just is what it is. But that doesn't mean that, I take that to my friend group and I'm like, I'm the loudest, which means I'm right. They'll tell me like, cut that out real quick. So I think people aren't afraid to speak up and say when something is bothering them or the way you're saying something hurt their feelings.
Well, a word that keeps coming up in recent days that I'm hearing is just listen to me. Just listen to me. So how in a relationship like this, how does a millennial who may have a very strong opinion about something, how does somebody maintain a listening aspect in a relationship?
Waiting until the other person is done speaking. That's the big thing. If you're only listening to react, you're not really listening. But that is something that people learn throughout time. It's something I'm still learning. Like I was ready to answer your question before you even finished. But when you interrupt, it comes off rude, even though you might just be passionate or you might be excited to talk about a topic. You really need to listen to what someone's saying, think about it for a minute, and then respond. And I think you'll get further, whether you're talking about something positive or you're having a difficult conversation. You'll get further if you just take a minute before responding.
My problem is I'll have a thought, and if I don't respond and interrupt you right away, then I can't remember what that thought was. So
yeah, no, it is hard sometimes, especially if someone's going on a little too long and you're like, what was that first thing they said? But again, if you're really listening, you won't forget what they're saying, and you'll know how to respond properly.
What are some of the common relationship pitfalls that millennials make?
Kaci kind of highlights it in her interview that I was shocked that a 20-something-year-old female admitted to this, but she said it's gossip. She goes, gossip is just not good no matter what. Keep it out of relationships. And that I'm actually going to quote something she said. By keeping gossip out of the conversation, it creates this safety in your relationship. Remember that if you have a friend or person in your life who refuses to talk to you about somebody else, then you can feel confident in knowing that they're going to refuse to talk to somebody else about you. And I just thought, yeah, she hit the nail on the head with that one.
And that's kind of hard because there are within culture and entertainment culture, and we were kind of talking a little bit of this offline. I mean, there are television programs that they're just all centered around gossip, and it's almost like you get immersed in it, and you don't even realize that you're gossiping when you are gossiping. I mean, I think that's a I don't want to say a danger, but that's something that probably really has an effect that on millennial generation that maybe my generation didn't have to struggle with so much.
Yeah, that's true. I actually never thought about it that way. We are so in tune with social media and reality TV. It's a big thing. My generation grew up on it, starting with, The Real World and then Laguna Beach. I mean, we've been engulfed in the right that we think we get to know everything about other people. And I think it's great to have a guilty pleasure with reality TV, but maybe you shouldn't bring that drama into your real relationships.
Well, we want you to give a listen to Michelle's interview with influencer Kaci Nicole.
Okay, so something that I found interesting about your profile, we kind of had searched, top Christian bloggers, influencers, and you were one of the first people that came up. And what I found really interesting was on your blog, it seems like you talk a lot about your relationships with friends and just kind of also a relationship with yourself and a relationship with God. Can you kind of talk about how you got started with your blog?
Yeah. So for me, my blog started my senior year of college. I was studying abroad in London. And that was just a really transformational time for me in my walk with God, where he was just sort of stripping down all these lies as far as how I had seen myself and just revealing a lot of who he was to me. And so I was growing a lot, and just from all the things I was learning, all the things he was showing to me, I had this natural desire to want to share those things. And for me, words have always been huge. I'm a words of affirmation person, and I just understand the power of words. So many books have influenced me and all that kind of stuff. And so I had that little inkling and that desire to want to start sharing, and that's really what started it all.
Oh, nice. And then can you just give some background about yourself? Like, where'd you go to school? What are you doing now? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so I went to Biola University. It's a private Christian university down in Southern California, very close to Disneyland, so that was fun. I graduated in 2014, and I had a double degree in communication studies and Bible, which looking back is really cool to see how God orchestrated those things. At the time, I sort of just picked them because I didn't really know what I wanted to do and figured that the communications degree would keep my options pretty open. And then everyone who goes to Biola gets a Bible minor. And so I upped it to a major just because I had some extra space in my schedule for that. And so after I graduated, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. And I ended up having a job opportunity open up back in the Bay Area and moved back home to take that. And so the role I'm in currently is for a utility company doing communications for different gas safety messages. And so I'm using the communications degree, definitely not the Bible one, but it's been cool to just learn things from that job as far as it relates to communications and see how that also kind of applies to blog stuff, and learning stuff from blog stuff that also applies to the job.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, wow, that's interesting. I got my degree in communications too.
Oh, awesome. It's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. So like I said, something that caught my eye that we haven't really talked about like here at, at the War Cry yet is friendships and faith. And like I said, I just found that being such a strong category on your blog as well really caught my eye. So how has being open about your faith affected your friendships, both positively and negatively?
Yeah, so I think for me, I grew up really in a Christian environment. So I went to a Christian school ever since I was in second grade, grew up going to church. And so for me, I think a lot of the close friends I've had just growing up and even through now into adulthood have been mainly Christian friends. And even if friends who aren't, I think most people know that is something that is a big part of my life. And so there was never sort of like a moment of having to tell people I was a Christian or seeing that affect my faith or anything. But I would say the impact has been mainly positive. I think just being able to pray for friends is a huge thing. I love doing that with my friends when we get together toward the end of our time together. I think it's something that just connects you on a deeper level. And I think also anytime any relationship is about something bigger than just the people involved, I think it just makes the relationship better, whether that be a friendship or romantic relationships or any of those types of things. I just think that being able to seek God alongside friends and encourage one another in that pursuit, that's only really ever added richness to my friendships and also given them a sense of purpose.
Okay, good. Has there been any, I know you said for the most part it's been positive, but has there ever been a time where like maybe, just a negative reaction from a friend? And if there was one, how did you handle it?
I can't think of necessarily with friends. It has come up with coworkers where I think more so as it relates to my social media, because so much of what I share is more driven by my blog content and YouTube content, and it is very faith-based. That I did have a coworker make a comment one time about like, oh, I like seeing your pictures of your life, but I don't really like to read through all of like the long faith caption stuff. It's kind of just like too much for me. And I just didn't take it personally. I figured, my real opportunity is just to continue to build a relationship with her in person. Like I don't need her to like be a blog follower or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I have seen that just because it's something that is such a huge part of my life. It can't really be separated from my life. And for people that's not the case, I think they can see it sometimes as just this like overwhelming thing, like don't be so, into all that stuff. But I really think like that's just been like a handful of times, not even that I've run into that. It's really been, I would say for the most part, positive.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some important factors, since you have gone through high school, you've gone through college, now you're an adult and you have coworkers, what are some really important factors to you when choosing, when someone becomes like an inner circle friend to you?
Yeah, for sure. So I think this one is huge. There's that saying that goes that we're the sum of 5 people who we spend the most time with, which I think is super true. And this is definitely not to say that we shouldn't be friends with everyone. I think that we definitely should, even if they don't have sort of these factors we're talking about. But I do think that those we allow closest to us and the people we allow to speak into our lives, that they have just a unique opportunity to influence who we become. And so that being said, I think it's really important that the people we're allowing to influence us are going to influence us toward the people we want to become. And so I think a couple of things for me. One is that they love God. I love having people close to me who I know are going to give me godly advice, that they're going to point me back to Him, that their advice is going to be grounded in His Word. Also friends who are going to be willing to call me out and hold me accountable when I need that they're not just going to, tell me what I want to hear, but they're going to speak truth to me. And so I think that's really important. And I think a huge one also is just that there's a safety in the relationship, that there's, that friend is for you, that they want what's good for you. And I think really that's just shown over time in the same way that sort of trust is built. And so I think those are really important things. Also, friends who ask good questions and who are going to be willing to, in turn, share honestly from their life, because I think just having that authenticity in the relationship really just breathes life into it.
So with that, just like you said, like kind of people, having a friend that kind of like calls you out, on that, because I know that's really important to me too. My friends, we are so honest with each other, and we know we always mean well, when we do kind of give our advice. What would be some advice to maybe people who are in a bit of a toxic friendship or just going through like a hardship with a friend right now?
Yeah, so I think that it's important, like it kind of depends on whether it is like that toxic friendship, right, or just a hardship. I think speaking to the hardship, if you're going through a hardship in your friend, first of all, that's super tough. I get that. For me, I'm somebody who really values friendship and I invest deeply. And so I get just like the pain and the sense of unrest that comes when things are really hard with friendships or a certain friend. It's really hard to not think about all the time. I would say my biggest advice for somebody in that situation is to just keep seeking God, pouring out your heart to Him, and then also doing your best to pursue peace and reconciliation with that friend where it's possible. One of the biggest things I've found in hindsight, looking back on those seasons where I was going through a hard time with a friend, is that sometimes friendships just go through growing pains, because you've got two individuals who are growing as individuals, and sometimes that means that you go through seasons where your broken edges are sort of rubbing up against each other and poking each other, and God needs to do some work in each of you before that friendship can get back to more of a peaceful place. And also God uses those people closest to us to shape us and those broken edges to refine us. The whole iron sharpens iron. So the other thing I'd say is to not shy away too quickly if things get hard. And as time goes on and as we're seeking Him and pursuing reconciliation, I believe that God really will make clear whether this friendship is going to be restored to, a close place in your life, or whether maybe going forward it's not going to have as close of a role in your life.
Yeah, definitely. And it sounds like you kind of like really, when even like maybe you're going through something, it seems like, you really lean on God and like kind of what you think He would want for you. And it seems like I'm going to assume that's always worked out for you,
Yeah, I think it hasn't always been easy. I'm thinking back on some of my closest friendships. We kind of went through growing pain seasons where the friendship was really hard for months. I'm thinking of one friend in particular, and we talk about this now all the time and kind of laugh at it, that our whole senior year of college, our friendship was just really tough. And so I would say, yes, it works out, but it's not always in the moment and it's not always quickly. Looking back, we can just both see how we needed to grow in a lot of ways. But yeah, through that whole process, I was just seeking God and asking for wisdom and discernment and asking Him to work in the situation and what I should do, because it was something that was really weighing on me.
Yeah, definitely. And, you just sound like so incredibly like you got the grasp of, God's like faith and love at such a young age. What do you think that young people can do to determine like what is God's will for them? How can they find their relationship with God being at such a young age?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest thing is to just be spending time with Him every single day. As somebody who did grow up in a Christian church, going to Christian school, I had homework that had me reading the Bible. This is something that I really didn't get until probably late college, just the power of spending time with God. As for knowing His will for us, I think that sometimes we see God's will as this grand plan or this set of marching orders that at some point He's going to hand over to us and that we're going to march on forward into His will for our lives. But I think that more often than not, it's a step-by-step thing, and that it happens as we're taking steps forward with Him, as we're seeking Him. There's an analogy that I've used before on my blog that I really love just because it helps me understand it, and that's the analogy of a GPS. So if you are driving in your car and you have the GPS set to a certain destination, well, the GPS is going to stay silent when you're stationary. So if you're parked and you don't have any sort of movement, the GPS isn't going to be talking to you at all. But if you move forward, even if you make a wrong turn, even if you aren't going the right direction, that GPS is going to reroute you and it's going to be talking to you and it's going to be getting you back onto the right path. But in order for that to happen, you need to have some movement. And so I would say, as for God's will, just be seeking him, doing things that we know are already a part of his revealed will. So the Bible talks about how God has this revealed will, and it's this general will that he has for all believers. And then he has his secret will, and that involves his specific plans for our lives as individuals. And there's a quote I heard from a pastor one time who said that we'll never know God's secret will for us unless we're obeying his revealed will. And God's revealed will is just simple, basic things like love him, love others, abide in Jesus, seek justice. And so I think as we're obeying that revealed will, that's when that secret will is going to become more clear to us as we're taking those steps forward.
When life demands 24/7 attention, you may find it impossible to rest. We live in a fast-paced world. It doesn't slow down, so why should you? With an engaging narrative, Rest for the Rest of Us provides a refreshing and informative take about Sabbath rest. It speaks to anyone looking to renew their sense of joy and find options for coping with life's pressures. Learn more at crestbooks.com.
So what you were saying, like, how would you encourage people, like, in kind of all stages of life? Because, you know, you do find, like, other friends. Like, I know I have friends from, like, when I was very young to high school to college to coworkers. You know, you find friends in different stages of life. Do you think that, like, God puts these people, I know you said, like, it's a stationary, like, GPS, like, it's not that he's necessarily doing it, but do you think he, in a way, does kind of intervene and put certain friends in your life at a time that you need them?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that there's been several times that's happened in my life, and I think he always gives us the people we need when we need them, and we may not always know even in the moment why we needed that friendship, but I think a lot of things become more clear in hindsight.
Yeah, definitely. And then, I mean, just a couple other questions I have, you know, when it comes to, like, friends, if you had, like, a friend that maybe wasn't comfortable with you being so outspoken, like, with your relationship with God, you know, maybe there's other people out there who do have friends like that. Like, what would be your advice to kind of finding that balance?
That is a tough one, because I think something we hear in our culture a lot is, you know, to not compromise, like, who you are and everything, which I think there's, like, truths and untruths to that kind of a thing. But I would say it kind of applies to this, that I don't think we should ever, like, try to hide our faith. I think that if you've got a friend who's not as comfortable, like, talking about faith things all the time, I think that's totally okay to have a relationship where that's not, like, something that you're talking about all the time, especially for somebody who's not a Christian. I think it's important that all people kind of know where you stand and what you believe. And I think that the things you love are naturally going to become a part of your conversation, but I think it is okay to, you know, ask a lot of questions about them. I think that's super, super important to get to know their life and what they believe and the things that matter to them, and that they want to talk about. And so I would say that's probably a great starting point, is to just focus on them and learning who they are.
Yeah, definitely. And then, you know, just kind of, again, wrapping it up, just kind of, like, about yourself, like, what has changed for you in, like, the last, you know, 5 to 10 years of your life? And then what do you see for, like, the next 5 to 10 years in your life? Like, what are some personal goals that you have?
Yeah, for sure. So I would say a lot of the change that has happened in my life has been really internal. There have been things that have happened, you know, circumstantially, like even within the past 5 years, was starting my blog, and I started a YouTube channel. I've written a devotional, but I would say the vast majority of the change that's happened has just been work that God's done in me to transform me from the inside out, to make me look more like him, to kind of break down lies and just wrong ways of seeing things. As for the future, I have learned enough to know that oftentimes what we plan, it doesn't always work out exactly how we thought it's going to go. But I would just say that I would love to continue creating the blog, my Instagram, YouTube, all those things where I'm able to just create and share different truths. I would love to see that to continue to grow and be just a bigger part of my life and something I get to do.
Yeah, definitely. And then what problems do you see emerging amongst friends that may create division or broken relationships?
I think the biggest thing that we have to guard against, especially as girls and as women, is gossip. I think growing up, I always saw that, as sort of one of those, like, trivial sins, that it's not, like, this huge deal. But the older I've gotten, the more I've just seen that it is poison to relationships. And so I would just say, if you have an issue or you have a concern, to do your best to go directly to that friend. I think as Christians, we can sometimes talk about people under this veil of concern, or, oh, I just want to pray for them in this area. But at the end of the day, it's still gossip. It's still hurtful, and it still creates division. And so I found that doing my best to keep gossip out of the conversation in my friendships, that it creates just this safety in your friendships, because if you have a friend who refuses to talk to you about somebody else, then you're going to also have confidence in knowing that they're going to refuse to talk to somebody else about you. And so I think that's just a huge one that we can sometimes write off, but it truly is important.
To read Michelle's full interview with Kaci, check out www.thewarcry.org. Michele, I just have a couple of more questions, just to follow up your time with Kaci. Why do you think Kaci's message is so important today?
I think the timing of her interview coming out is very well deserved. There's been obviously a lot going on in the past few months. And I just think the biggest thing is, like we talked about earlier, listen to what other people are saying, and then create your own opinion, within yourself, and as well as just keeping God the center of everything. As long as you're being a good person, you're not judging other people, you're not gossiping about other people, you'll just have a better outlook on life. You'll feel lighter, you'll be more positive. And I just think that's the most important message that she sent.
Well, thank you for that very transparent response. And, that's a huge takeaway. And hopefully our listeners will pay attention to what Kaci has to say, that they'll look her up, go to her vlogs and read a little bit more. I think God is obviously using her to speak to this current generation in positive ways for all of us, regardless of age, that we need to make sure that we're promoting healthy relationships in our lives. Well, that's going to end this episode of the Fight for Good podcast. Be sure to subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to your podcasts. We also ask you to follow us follow the War Cry and Peer Magazine on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest. We thank you for your interest there. But until next time, this has been the Fight for Good podcast. Be safe, be healthy in all of your relationships, and God bless you.
Subscribe to Fight for Good wherever you listen to podcasts.